It's another Manly Monday, and this Manly Monday we are talking about problem anger. And this was inspired by a article that a Discord server member actually shared that he thought was interesting. It was an article on CTV News. It was based on a survey done back in April, but they just released it now, from the Canadian Men's Health Foundation, about problem anger. Now, they don't define problem anger in this press release. I always go to the source. But okay, so it says problem anger. Here we go. When anger interferes with daily life, relationships, and work. I'm just pointing out the term problem anger because, I don't know, it's a little stigmatizing, but it's the term that they use. But the top line is that 50% of men aged 19 to 29 are at risk of problem anger. I'm not sure what that means, but it's compared to 22% of all Canadian men. 39% of men aged 19 to 29 report a violent impulse when getting angry in the past month, compared to 16% of Canadian men and 36% of BIPOC. I get this wrong. Black, Indigenous, person of color. That's what BIPOC means, I think. I don't know. But anyway, it means not white people. 36% of BIPOC men and 26% of men aged 30 to 44 can also be classified as being at risk of problem anger. That's a weird sentence, but I guess it means that BIPOC men are higher than Canadian men. It makes you wonder if there's more to be angry at. I don't know. But it was that 50% of men aged 19 to 29 can be classified as being a risk of problem anger. And let me do the help support this channel, and then we'll get into some of the reasons I think this isn't an attack on men. Some of the responses, some of the solutions they've given are very interesting to me. So let's do the help support this channel and we'll get there. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/Leanna K. Like and subscribe to this channel. The one-time Leanna Care session is very apt in this. We will get to that in a bit. What the whole thing talks about is, younger men live with higher levels of anxiety and depression, a lot of shame, and it's emerging with something, but they are saying it's a call to action on young men's mental health, and I'm super supportive of that. We solve these problems. We make things better for women properly. We make things better for everyone. We assist young men like this. We make things better for everyone, right? And getting past the lip service of "you are not alone" is going to be the real challenge here. What they say is we need to create programs that respect men's reality. They don't really say what that means. But one of the things that I have something called a MindFit Toolkit here. I'll link to this if anybody's interested in that. But the sort of secondary information in this talks about the fact that there is still shame and stigma, especially for men seeking clinicians like doctors. And the people involved in this work, the Canadian Men's Health Foundation. Did I get that right? Yes, Canadian Men's Health Foundation. President and CEO said that because there's still stigma attached to seeing a doctor, they said we're really getting behind this idea of talking to a friend or family member, this idea that you're not alone. And that's, that's what I'm doing. The quote goes on, what you're going through is something that all of us can understand and appreciate. It's really a community effort to make sure young men in particular are heard, seen, and listened to, and that they're not chastised or put aside. Now, I wonder about the chastised, because there does have to be some correction. I know a lot of guys don't want the safe space thing. They want to be, as they say, called on their shit. But I do think the overall message of listening over condemning and correcting or suggesting improvements instead of criticizing. And then even when it's something that is sort of, you have to tell somebody that they didn't do something quite ideally. And that's different than saying you did it wrong, but sometimes you'd have to tell somebody they did it wrong too. The fact that it's done in a supportive way instead of a thing that just crushes someone's spirit, I think that is really, really important. And I think it's interesting that, my absolute nastiest critics go after the fact that I don't have a license, but the reality is that a lot of the guys I work with wouldn't come to me if I did, which is what this research says. So on the one hand, I'm like, no, that was a joke. It is validating to realize I'm on the right track. Now, that doesn't mean get a swelled head. There is a role for doctors, Some guys do need medication. Some guys do need help with addiction. And there's a serious problem in this country about unregulated detox centers that are horror shows. And it's not that there are regulated and unregulated detox centers. Regulation of addiction counseling goes province to province. And so some provinces have regulations and others don't. A lot of addiction counselors, Alcoholics Anonymous is the big one, are peer counselors like me. I don't specialize in addiction. But there's a role for everything. And I do think it's very promising that, organizations like this are saying, look, we've got to get out of the doctor's office with this stuff, because it's true. A lot, and like last week's It's Not Therapy. It's Not Therapy. Dealt with this, that if you ask a guy, are you okay? He may say yes, even if he's not. The consciousness of how much distress a guy is in is sometimes not there because they don't feel like they have that luxury. And there's a few guys I work with now where we are working on really stopping, and instead of going over the series of events in something, traumatic or hurtful or scary, it's like, I want you to describe how you felt, not what happened, how you felt. And sometimes it takes a few tries because they are so used to being shut down regarding their feelings, they don't even bother to feel them anymore. And that frustration is going to build and build and build and build into problem anger. And one of the toughest things I do is sometimes I have to check people on their problem anger. And sometimes they don't like it. Well, they never like it, but a lot of guys, they appreciate the frankness, and the relationship grows stronger. There's more trust because they know at that point I will call them on their shit. So when I say, no, you did nothing wrong here, I'd tell you if I thought you did, they believe me. And that's really important. And that's not the same as chastising somebody. It's like, no, I'm not cool with this. So what I tend to do is look, nobody's happy with the result here. So let's work on a plan together to prevent this from happening again. Wound up with a pair of stalkers for that. It's amazing how some people, and there's a lot of women with problem anger out there. It tends to come out as passive aggressive. So I think we don't really call it what it is, which is why I hedged on the whole term problem anger. I think what we're really talking about with that is a sort of explosive reaction, that's something that wrecks stuff. And the number of times the enablers around or the people themselves that have problem anger will do things like, well, I'm better than I was. It's like, well, yes, but this behavior is still destructive, both to yourself and other people. But I'm better than I was. Well, yes, I acknowledge that. So great. Let's keep working towards better. Because just because you've done better, I can't tell you something sufficient when it's not. And that, of course, tends to cause another explosion. Not all the time. Sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised, and just because I'm expecting the explosion doesn't mean I don't give a guy a chance to do better. And that, I think, is too rare and something we need to normalize more. If I set a boundary with the guy and he blows up in my face, that's on him. If I don't set a boundary and just judge him, that's on me. So, the stalkers like to say, well, she has so many conflicts with people. And it's like, well, that's because I actually give somebody a chance and they don't take it well. But I still stand by that because I would rather check someone on something and have it blow up and have them rip me on the internet for months, sometimes years at a time, than be the person doing the moral wrong. And I do believe that not treating adults like adults, not telling somebody when it's solvable that there's an issue with their behavior, I do think that's wrong. I do. I think that people try to be nice, or I'm afraid he'll explode on me. Like, so what? Do you really think he's going to hit you? If so, get far, far away right now. But if you're just afraid of other people's anger, well, that's probably an indication of some guilt, blame, and shame inside you, that you think there's something wrong with you because you made someone angry. And the truth is that people can be angry and not be explosive, not be destructive. And a lot of men don't, their primary examples are not that. They were raised by people who were either profoundly neglectful and only paid attention to them when they had a tantrum, or had adult tantrums themselves. And so they were raised, or a combination of both. They were raised to believe that real men have tantrums that's strong. And it's amazing to me, the men that say, well, I'm at my most emotional and vulnerable when I'm behaving that way. Wow. Okay. At that point, that's above my pay grade. I have learned not to try to step into that, because that is a serious cognitive distortion. because anger is the opposite of vulnerable. The like brain hormones that are released from anger are, adrenaline, that just, it feels like powerful, like rage mode in God of War. That's why I fucking love God of War. Because what is that? Like, sure, yeah, it's temporary, punch everything out there, but that's about all it's good for. You can't make logical decisions when you're like that. Vulnerable is sadness, is fear, is if the most vulnerable that you get is masking actual vulnerable states with rage, you're not actually being vulnerable. And you can't expect a person to weather your abuse to prove they care. That's just not right. And that has nothing to do with those underlying feelings, not being valid. It's more that they are valid. So cut the crap and let's talk about them, And we do suck at boundaries as a culture. We are too fear-driven. We tend to overemphasize threats. That doesn't mean threats aren't out there. We just tend to overemphasize them, and we don't find the correct solutions to combating them. And to me, I'd rather go, hey, no, not okay for me, and have a guy blow up in my face in a fairly public setting, in a place where I have less exposure, than to be nice. And I mean, I've done this too many times. I am far less tolerant for men with anger problems. It's ongoing work because my father had anger problems. And yeah, I really do believe that it hid a real deep pain and shame. It doesn't excuse what he did. And it's been really eye-opening since I've been talking about my father's behavior. And one of the problem anger men that, I had a run-in with puts up on the internet, oh, I'd like to know her father's side of the story. Asshole. But that's what problem anger does. Like, that's just a stupid thing to say. Tactically, it's better to go, look, I believe that. I believe that. Give people anything you can to, show that you're not just driven by a malevolent hate. That's healthy. And you can be angry at someone and still go, no, when they told me that, I believe them. They were telling the truth with how bad it was, It would even be a better lie to say it affected my behavior going forward than claim I'm lying. But the people that do see it as true, they are horrified by what I went through as a kid. And until I started talking about it, I didn't realize how bad it was. Total honesty. And I have to reassure guys that just because they didn't have it as bad as I did growing up, that the abuse that they underwent was still real and still meaningful, and they deserve healing from it. They deserve better than what they got. And it takes some time to work through that, as a child, they didn't get what they deserved. And we don't talk to men that way a lot. And I think it's wrong. I think we skip steps with women and men and non-binary people. But with men especially, this idea, oh, it made you tough or it made you strong. I mean, I don't think abuse never makes you strong. Support makes you strong. It's a misnomer. And that's the problem. We get these young men who, the thing I've seen with men in that age group, and this is not a criticism of them, this was done to them. They are a combination of abused and coddled and neglected. The trifecta, right? And so there is a real destabilized quality where they perform strength, but I'll do this. And this is something I was taught from outreach workers back at Jane and Finch. Some tough guy comes at you, you match their energy at about 70%. But you don't back off. You don't coddle them if they're coming at you hard. You go, well, all right, see ya. It's, you're not interested in what I have to say. You think my advice is junk. See ya. 9 times out of 10, they flip the fuck out and say you came at them, which is always fascinating. And if you try to tough talk them, what they claim to want, you'll hear a lot of, I'm just interested in business. I'm just interested in business. I'm fine. My feelings are fine. As long as I'm making money, my mental health is great. That's not how it works. It's not how it works. And the minute you go, okay, we're going to talk business, crumble. And it's not their fault. It's not their fault. They've never been given an example where they could talk honestly and vulnerably about themselves, not throwing blame around, not you did this and you did that, not the language of criticism, not the language of judgment, but just, I feel this because this happened. That simple skill, which they're taught the foundations of, but then they're not rewarded for applying it. There's no practice, and they're putting up this facade, and they are. We gotta treat men under 30 like they're still young men, and there's no shame in that. That is a precious part of life. It's a time to take certain risks. It's a time to continue to figure out who you are, and it's a part of life where back in the day, a lot of men were sort of married off and put into work at that point and had some sort of financial stability. Now it's an era of school until you're at least, 22? And then there's crushing student debt, and then maybe there's a master's degree or a PhD. That is a different part of life, because we're living longer than ever, that hasn't existed previously. This is something that has come up now that college degrees are almost mandatory, or some sort of extended education, and, the debt burden that comes with it, and the fact that houses are fucking expensive. And, houses cost $1 million more than the equivalent house did when I bought my first house back in 1999. That's how bad it is. I feel fortunate to have gotten into the market when I did. It's gotten stupid. Like, that kind of inflation, nobody can absorb that. Fuck it. And so there is this new developmental period. And, I call it, like I said, they're young men. They're not kids. They're not teens. They're young men, aged 19 to 29. And quite frankly, a 19-year-old is still a teenager. We're talking the adolescence doesn't shut down in the brain until about 25, but some is 28. So extended adolescence. But we don't treat this as its own life stage. And I think we need to. The needs are unique. And I think that because we don't treat this as a place where, yes, these men and women between the ages of 19 and 29, they are not minors anymore, but they still need more support than somebody over 30. These kids are ashamed. I shouldn't say kids. Young people, young adults are ashamed. And so men especially try to solve problems themselves that cannot be solved themselves, because it really helps to talk it out. It does. It to a real person, not a fucking chatbot. Chatbots are fun to play with your favorite anime character or something like that. I got no problem with entertainment bots, even the lewd ones. But it is not a substitute for another person validating what you're going through, validating your feelings. There is nothing that replaces that human-to-human connection, that feeling that someone is on your side. And trying to replicate that with a bot may feel good in the short term, because it's like words on a screen, like you're texting your friend. But over time, you know it's not. And it compounds the loneliness. Not because there's anything wrong with using the bot. It's a great journaling assistance tool. But it's no substitute for talking to things. And can we stop using go to therapy as a rejection, as a kiss off? That's really, really bad behavior. Because if a guy keeps hearing go to therapy whenever he gets angry, well, obviously there's a pejorative associated with therapy, right? Like, this is not helpful. And it is fair. And I reached this point in therapy where I realized that I had plateaued. Therapy wasn't plateaued. Therapy wasn't doing much for me anymore, other than costing me a lot of money. What I realized I needed, and in fairness, my therapist has been telling me that for a year now, is that I needed better friends. I needed actual friends, not transactional friends, not friends who were just using me to get stuff out of me, you know, because I'd put on events and give them a chance to get drunk and have a really fun time and dress up, and, you know, then they weren't there for me. And, you know, I had a house and there were no kids, so hey, parties and all that stuff, right? But yeah, that was hard, because it's kind of like dating with less structure, because nobody's forced to be your friend. And I do think that's a bit of a problem with the way millennials were raised, because with us, it was always, yeah, people don't have to like you. But millennials, they were all sort of forced in with each other, and you're all on the same team. You're all friends here. No, you're not. No, you're fucking not. I'm grateful that I learned how to handle somebody not liking me and learned to handle not liking another person. I can not like someone and still respect them. I can not respect or like someone and not want them destroyed. I have restraint in that regard. And I do think that we have trained younger people to, if you don't like someone, they must be bad. If someone doesn't like you, you must be bad. And that's not true. This is not a zero-sum thing. Sometimes people just rub you the wrong way. I know people, I've worked with people that drive me crazy as a human being. They're great at what they do. And then you have to figure out, okay, where's the threshold? Like, when is something merely irritating or annoying and therefore something I should learn to tolerate versus something being morally wrong? You know, if I think somebody's being abusive, no, I'm not going to tolerate that because they're a great artist, for instance, right? No. Or a musician or a writer or whatever. When someone crosses into shit person territory, I have a no assholes policy, and that has been super strengthened. You may have noticed lately. I am just done. And part of it, again, I said this last week, that if there is no reward for good behavior, all the punishment for bad behavior in the world will not do anything. And I do think that these young men between the ages of 19 and 29 have been through this gauntlet of punishment with very little reward or validation. And that's why they try to solve their problems on their own. And then they go out there and scream at people on the internet over video games. It makes sense. It's not their fault. It was done to them. They were trained to be this way. The vast majority of them do not really have like a very serious mental health condition. They are poorly socialized and chronically invalidated and emotionally neglected, in some cases abused. That's a fixable problem. It's going to take work on everybody's part, but if they don't want to go to therapy, don't go to therapy, but talk to somebody. Talk to a church leader, talk to someone you respect, like obviously with their consent. But we do need more sounding boards that aren't like, it's mentorship, it's not therapy. And we do need a lot more of that. We had a lot more of that culturally, everywhere, work, home, extended families. We knew our neighbors better. We had a lot more of that historically. Now we don't, because everything is funneled. Everything is training instead of mentorship. And I mean, quite frankly, more and more people don't want to help the up-and-comers because those are the ones that'll shank you and take your job. And that's what's facing men in their 50s right now. So sure, of course, mentorship's taking a shit. But we can solve this problem. And for all the shit I take for, the services I set up to solve precisely this problem. The vast majority of my clients are men. Precisely for this reason. And I take nothing but shit. But things like this validate that, because people think, oh, they need it from another guy. Not all the time. If their problem is their mother, they might need to hear it from an older woman. So a lot of the guys I work with are actually my age. That was a joke. But, it's not just men who have some accountability regarding how, the young men of today are shaping up. It's everybody. Women have a part to play. And this stupid gendered manosphere feminism. We need another term for that shit. They say pop feminism, but that's not even it, because it's not feminism at all. It's the femosphere. That needs work. But yeah, the fact that we've separated everything is just, gender complementarianism with a different coat of paint. And that's not good for anybody, but it's a solvable problem. And, this information proves we're on the right track here in this community. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K, or buy a one-time Leanna K session for someone who but can't afford it. Coffee.com/Leanna K. I'm going to go lie down. Thanks for watching Manly Mondays.